Welcome to another episode of the Impossible Life Podcast. I'm your co-host, Nick Surface, and I'm sat across from a man so stealthy he once surprised himself. That's right, friends, the former Navy SEAL, Garrett Unkelbach, a man who only does covert ops.
It's mostly true. I'm unsurprisable.
Oh, I should have known you couldn't get the drop even on yourself. Man, I thought you were...
That would be a better intro.
he can't even... Well, dude, no. My intros are great. Just leave them alone. Okay, I'm not... You give me a lot of feedback on a lot of things. You will not be adding my intros into that.
That's what you think.
Well, you know what? We'll see what happens. Anyways, if you are watching on YouTube's or if you were watching...
I'm excited for today.
Yeah, I am too. This is going to be a great podcast. But before we do, if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, wow, Garrett and Nick look amazingly buffer and, something really positive about the way... Okay, dude, it's both of us. The way that they look, it is because we were both wearing Impossible Life t-shirts that we literally just got in last week. Don't like to brag. It's not extra medium, but we are definitely rocking them. And I like these things. Bigger. Yeah, dude. If you want to look better, you will get this shirt. It's just as simple as that. Now, on a serious note, though.
If I want to buy a shirt for me and all of my friends, where do I get one?
You go to theimpossible.life and you can go check out the shop, G. On a serious note, though, these things are super soft, and we're both wearing the Journey tee, which is basically it's the Impossible Life is written a couple times, and it starts off as the Impossible Life, and the I am slowly fades out to where all that's left is possible.
Which is reflective of the journey.
Exactly, and that's why it's called the Journey tee. Starts off, things look impossible. With God, nothing is impossible, G. Boom. There you go. So we had to comment on that.
I'm excited about that. I'm excited about so many things right now. I'm excited about all of the growth that we're experiencing, all the fun things we're doing, and I'm excited about the topic today.
Yes, I'm excited about the topic as well.
This is a good one.
Today's topic, I was going to say, if you could listen to maybe one episode that if you just said, you know what, I'm not going to listen to anything else they do or they've ever said, but I'm just going to do this one episode, this might be the episode. And that's a huge, lofty intro, but I stand by that because this is a game changer.
I want to, on that thought, I was thinking about this earlier today with some books that I've read.
Oh, no.
I want to give an early challenge. Just they're totally mixing it up here.
Okay.
If you remember, for a lot of people, you've had, when you first started listening to this, you listened to, someone introduced you to the leadership series, or someone introduced you to, the resilience episode or the episode on fear.
Right.
There was probably an episode that someone recommended to you when you started this. If you're more than 6 months into listening to the Impossible Life podcast and you haven't, go back and listen to the first episode that you listened to when you came. You'll hear how we've changed, but also you'll hear how you've changed.
Yeah. You know what's also interesting about that? So when I listened to our older episodes, I realized how much more intense you were in our earlier episodes. Like it was, it's been kind of fun to go back and see the journey. Hey, reference to the T, bing. But it's fun times.
Thank you to everybody that's been on this journey.
Seriously, man, it's amazing. And we're going to keep going. We are charging towards 100 episodes, G, and we're going to nail that.
To the top.
And we're just going to keep going. But yeah, we told them how great today's episode was going to be, and we didn't tell them what this topic was. It's intentionality.
Yes.
And if intentionality...
We may have intentionally not told them, so you were going to intentionally say something else.
Boom, next level. But yeah, I think it's interesting that this is a word that's very commonly out there, like a lot of things that we cover, but we're going to dive into it.
We're going to probably start with a story and then get into the definition of that word because it's a word that you need to think about more intentionally.
Wow. Garrett is on a different level today, friends. So fun times. All right, so in 2015... Shelly Galley from Casper, Wyoming, was sitting there on Valentine's Day when she had a bouquet of flowers delivered to her door for Valentine's from her husband, which was incredibly kind. But she was really, really just super surprised. Why was she so surprised, G? Because unfortunately, her husband, Jim Galley, had died the previous year in June from cancer. Now, you want to talk about intentionality. What Jim did before he passed away was he arranged with a flower store to have her get a bouquet of flowers on Valentine's Day every year for the rest of her life. And it even had a card. It said, "Happy Valentine's Day, honey. Stay strong. Yours forever. Love, Jim." Isn't that amazing? Like, you talk about intentionality, dude, to have some foresight. That's a pro-level move right there.
I'm thinking about how, flower shops should sell that.
Well, I mean, I had some logistic questions.
Not just the part after you die, but I mean, just like help, like get men set up. Like, hey, let's get you set up on the monthly
flower
subscription.
plan. Yeah, someone out there has probably done it, man.
And that's really what people think intentionality is.
Yeah, that's for most people are like, wow, that guy's super intentional. What a guy. He nailed it, right? Well, there's a lot more to that. We're going to get into it. So let me ask you guys a question out there. You're sitting there and you're going, okay, we're going to get into intentionality. Have you ever gone to the kitchen and decide, hey, I'm going to make myself a cup of coffee? You go to make yourself a cup of coffee, and on the way there, you realize, hey, we're all out of coffee cups. Oh, I'll get one out of the dishwasher. Open up the dishwasher. Oh, man, I've got to unload the dishwasher. It's full. So I unload the dishwasher, and then I look up and I go, oh, there's all these dirty dishes. So you load the dishwasher with the dirty dishes, and then you happen to notice, hey, there's a little bit of leftover dinner from last night. So you go over, put it in the trash can. Oh, man, trash is overflowing. Need to take the trash out. Now you take the trash outside, put that in there. While you're out there, you realize, oh, man, it's today's trash day. I got to take the trash cans to the curb. So you go do that. You come back in. Oh, I got to put a bag in the trash because I just took it out. So you do that. And then you sit there and go, what was I doing again? And by this point, it's probably been half an hour, 45 minutes. And you can't remember why
I hope it didn't take you that long to take out the trash.
Look, they're very detailed about the trash. But the point is
maybe
that
you have a really long driveway.
Hopefully, baller. Thanks for interrupting me, Garrett. But the point of that
That's
is,
what I'm here for.
Yeah, you do a great job of that. The point is that is what a lot of people, that's how their days go. It's like they go to do one thing, they get distracted, or they have 7 other things that they notice that need to be done. And it's like, well, I better do that as well while I'm here. And before you know it, it's like, wait, why was I here again? People do this when they drive a lot.
That's what a lot of, especially when you're not intentional with your life, when you don't have a set of priorities, that's what your life looks like.
Yeah.
It's like, what am I doing? Well, what just knocked on my door?
Mm-hmm.
What email did somebody just send me?
Yes.
What text did I just get asking me for something? People are always telling you what they need from you, and that's where your directive comes from.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Email, SMS, we're bogged down by interruptions in today's society.
But that's not, if you get SMS from The Impossible Life, you should listen to those.
Well, yeah, obviously. Yeah, or emails from us. But on a serious note, though, intentionality. So it's one of those words that I feel like sometimes I feel like things with intentionality, people can get like super spiritual, or you get like these people who are a little bit new agey about like, oh, intentionality. And like, it's a term that's thrown around. It's become very commonplace to hear people say like, oh, they're very intentional. But I think there's a difference between intentionality and the way that I think it's used in pop culture and the way that we're going to be talking about. So where did we go for our definition, G? Our beloved.
Good old 1828 Webster's Dictionary.
As always. And we have a great quote from John Locke.
So sometimes in Noah's 1828, like, what a great dictionary, right? If you read the Oxford or you read the Merriam-Webster, like sometimes they'll use a sentence for context,
right?
But they won't give quotes.
Right.
In the 1828 Noah Webster's Dictionary, he'll give quotes from you typically American or British people that were wise people. He'll use like this understanding of the word, or he'll even quote the Bible sometimes.
Right. Yeah, a lot of times.
So way different than a normal dictionary.
Very different.
In many ways, yeah. What was the quote in?
So, of course, he nailed it. He had 3 different ones, but he said it's design or purpose. And this is what I like. It's a stretching or bending of the mind towards an object. And the quote that he used from John Locke, listen to this. Intention is when the mind, with great earnestness and choice, fixes its view on any idea, considers it on every side, and will not be called off by the ordinary solicitation of other ideas. What a great way to sum that up, man.
When the mind, with great earnestness of choice, fixes its view on any idea, considers it on every side, and will not be called off by the ordinary solicitation of other ideas. It breaks it down into multiple pieces there.
Yes.
Like, clearly what you want. You're looking at it from all angles, which also means like I've had a lot of opportunities to be distracted. I'm very focused on what I want, and I will not be called off by the ordinary. I love that. Like, what a great definition of distractions. The ordinary solicitation of other ideas.
Yeah. And I mean, you said it, like when they didn't have texts and emails when they wrote this, but man, do we have the ordinary solicitation of other ideas just flying at us.
So even back then, before people had like text and SMS, people, there was way more context of being focused on a specific mission for a set period of time.
Yeah.
Stuff took longer back then.
Yeah, for sure.
You actually had to be, like, for most people in this day and age, to be determined on an objective for a year seems like a long time. Right? For back then, sometimes it took people a year to get across the globe.
Right.
Like if you're visiting the other side of the world, it took a year to get there.
Yeah.
Right? Most people can't do something for, 7 days in a row.
Right.
Let alone be on the same journey for a year.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot what of intentionality is like. There's a word that I learned, this is just like some pretext to getting into intentionality. It's a word that I learned in the Navy called hold fast. And this was, and it's a great analogy for this. A ship, the word hold fast, it's an Old English word. It's also in the Bible. I've used it in that context too. And this, I've done a sermon on this before, but the word hold fast, when you go back to the original context of how it was used to describe how sailors would hold fast to a ship. So think about that. Like a sailor was told to hold fast to the ship. And you might be thinking like, what is a guy like just holding onto the rail so the ocean doesn't sweep him overboard? No, a sailor would hold fast to the ship, meaning that while you're going across the ocean, right? We've set a course. We're leaving the UK, we're leaving Africa, and we are on our way to the new land, right? Like that's, well, you know, a lot of people's context of sailing the Pacific Ocean is a serious journey, right? So we've set a course for where we want to go. The sailors would hold fast to the ship, meaning, you know, we've got winds changing constantly. The rigging and the ropes stretch out on the ship. The water current changes constantly back and forth, and we have to readjust the ship at all times back to maintain its course.
Yeah.
And intentionality is this way of thinking where it's like, look, I know where I want to go to. I know where I want things to be like, and I have to make decisions today that'll help get me there. Because I can take one step in that direction, but if I close my eyes and throw my compass out the door and just keep taking steps and hope I'm going to get there, you'll never get there. Your intentionality is to give each step with direction, with design, with purpose.
Yeah.
And I love in the definition too, it talks about stretching or bending your mind towards an object. You know what that is to me? That's to really see it before you get there, to stretch your mind before you're even there, to picture being there, and then to align your actions and to remove all distractions. That's like the summary of intentionality to me, but I know we're going to get into it deeper.
We are. Well, I love what you referenced there, though, because 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks at this point, if you didn't hear Garrett's story, go back and listen to Garrett's story, because first of all, I just thought it was so powerful to hear you lay it all out like that for the first time. And so many times you saw it first in your mind before you actually then realized it. And you said on that podcast, one of your quotes was, one of the greatest joys in life is to dream something and then go out and see it come true. And I love that. So just a little shout out for a couple episodes ago to ourselves. So, G, when we're talking about intentionality, the ultimate example of intentionality is God.
Absolutely. God is intentional through all of time. When you really, not just when you've, heard a sermon or a message or read some scripture, but when you really study who God is, and a lot of that is the Old Testament. You look at the way God works with man. God is extremely intentional.
Yes.
God doesn't just have relationship with a person. God has relationship with humanity, and he does things over hundreds and thousands of years, right? Like for us, a lifetime is, for the average person, it's 70, 80 years. Back then it was even shorter, except in the very early times of the Bible. And God sometimes won't talk to anybody for 400 years.
Yeah.
It's like, where's God? Like, God's on his own timeline, right? But he's actually, even though you're not hearing him, God's doing something.
Yeah.
Right? He's in a process. And so God works in a long timeline, but we know, like, the most intentional of who God is he sees the end from the beginning.
Yes.
He has a plan, and he's moving everything in that direction. Out of God's omniscience and out of God's omnipotence, he can see everything. He knows everything. He can move in and out of time. God is so intentional. But what's crazy, that seems like insane to think about. But here, to me, this is equally crazy. There's a verse that you won't hear preached very often, and it's not meant to put man up on a pedestal, but it's really meant to honor who God is and who he made us as sons and daughters of God. Psalms 8:5 says that, who are we that we were made a little lower than God?
Yeah.
God made us in his image. So all the things that God does, like I've talked about this before, and I think it's one of the most powerful things that, God spoke the earth into motion, and our words also are so powerful. And there's a reason that nothing else on the earth speaks except for man. One of the great things that God is extremely intentional. He sees the end from the beginning. And it's another great thing that he's given us. He's made us in that way. If you want to do something really, really special with your life, dedicate your whole life to a thing. Be constantly moving everything into one direction where all the points will align.
Yeah.
That level of intentionality will make you live an incredible life. The opposite of intentionality is like the story that Nick told of, wanting a cup of coffee, where my life literally just goes wherever it goes based upon what happens to me. And you'll live a life of no significance, right? But when you'll live a life of intentionality, you'll live a life of purpose and meaning and of great significance.
Yeah. And for those of you that might be going, well, he's God and we're not, we have such a short lifetime. What you said there, G, was so powerful, man. Just if you want to live an exceptional life, just go all in on one thing. And I mean,
well, just because we live a short life, one, have an eternal context for your life. What you do during your living life still has meaning after. It has meaning after you're dead on earth, and it also has meaning in eternity.
Yeah.
Right. But like, how special when people can do things that, like the guy with the flowers, that even after he's gone, he's having an impact on people. You can live a life, you can do things with your life that it's like, I'm not living for tomorrow. I'm not even living for 5 years from now. Like, one of the things that I'm very intentional about in my life is the way that I am with my wife, the way that I am with my family, because I'm not just thinking about like, I hope my kids like me one day and like they'll take care of me when I retire. No, I'm thinking this is what I want my great grandchildren to think like and act like. And by the time when I'm in my 80s and 90s and my great grandchildren are being born and growing up, they're going to grow up in a certain way of thinking. They're going to grow up in a certain life that helps them become everything that they're created to be. And ultimately, that my family will have great impact on the world and great impact on the kingdom.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's good.
Doing things today to prepare for that life. I'm not doing things today for like, man, I hope I'm able to retire one day.
Right.
I have a great vision for where I want to go with my life, what it's going to look like. And I'm very intentional about stepping towards that.
Yeah. No, that's good, G. And I think that was the pattern that we talked about with God. I mean, he'll say something. I love that he says something. He brings the first covenant with Moses, right? And then they go through a period of judges with the Israelites, which is like hundreds of years. And then they have their first king, right? They have Saul as their first king. And when he's talking to Samuel or he's talking to whoever it is, what does God always say when he introduces himself? I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I brought your people up out of Egypt. This is like somebody referencing something to you from before if you're in America, from before the Declaration of Independence, and being like, hey, I came over here on the Mayflower, and you're like, dude, that's forever ago. What are you talking about? You're talking about like it's like yesterday. But that is how God is when he sets something in place. When we talk about him being the example of intentionality, he sets something in place. And it's not like he changes or gets excited by something new and drifts off or like, oh, well, that was good for a short period. I want something new. What's the newest thing? He's like, hey, this is where we're going. Like, we're setting on it. So I just wanted to emphasize that point because I think it's important that we reference that. Now, default on this one, Garrett, and we've talked about it a few times here with like the coffee example, but if you're in a default mode, this is how most people live. Very short time frame orientation. And I'm not even talking about like a day. Like sometimes people's time frame.
By the way, if you don't know time frame, we did a whole podcast on time frame orientation. It's a mindset and a skill set that you want to have. If you've not listened to that one, put it on your list to go back and listen to. Time frame orientation. We dive deep into that one.
Yeah. I always love when people come up and say like, hey, I really like this episode because I'm always curious which ones they pick out. Yeah. Our man Norm Hayes, who's on Mindset Mastery with us, shout out to Norm. He brought that one up to me the other day and I was like, I'm so glad you picked up on that because I thought that was a powerful one.
It is a key to success.
Yes, it really is.
Your time frame orientation. If you are in a short, you can have a lot of great values in your life. But time frame orientation is a perspective power that allows you to be intentional in a very different way.
Yes.
If you can't see very far down the road, even if you're intentional, you're not going to be very effective.
Right. So if you're on default, you are just thinking about whatever is in the moment, right? And maybe you think a little bit longer, like we talked about on that episode. It's 5 and 2, 5 work days, so I can have 2 days to myself. But I mean, it can get really, really short. What do I have to do just for this next 5 minutes? How do I get the workday over? How do I get to lunch? People can be really, really short-minded on that. So what are you going to do? Whatever it takes to get through that moment, which means you're going to be all over the place.
When you have I saw long-term time frame orientation benefit me so greatly in my difficult journey through the SEAL teams, right? In the same way, like people go through difficult things in their life and they're like, man, like I could lose next month. I could lose my job. I could, not have enough money, whatever it is, whatever the big negative scenario in your mind is that you're thinking about for Q3 or Q4, right? If you're only focused on that, That's all you'll see. But you can also zoom out, look at a longer time frame and say, like, that could happen, but I'm going to work hard to make sure it doesn't. But that's not even what I'm focused on. What I'm focused on is that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 30 years from now, here's where I'm going to be. And here's the things that I can do today to make sure that I end up there. Whether Q3 goes the way I want it to or not, here's what 2050 is going to look like. Here's what 2060 is going to look like. And you change the time frame orientation of your life, just like I did in SEAL training. I'm not like, man, how do I survive like this massive beatdown that's going to happen tomorrow? Yeah. I'm thinking, here's where I'm going to be in 6 months, and here's where I'm going to be in 2 years, right? And being intentional and walking towards that, not just trying to hide out of a fear of pain of the difficult situation in front of me.
Yeah. Well, and you said that, and we're going to come back to what you just said, but you talked about the fear of pain. That's the next thing that default looks like. You are a distracted person. And what are you distracted with? You're distracted usually with one of two things, either pleasure or pain. So you're either being dictated to all the time by, like, I got the pain of these bills, I got the pain of this responsibility or that responsibility. I've got the pleasure of, oh man, I'd really like to do this, or oh, I'm excited about this today.
Just remember, this is what default looks like.
Yeah.
Right. So if you struggle from short-term time frame orientation, if your life and your thinking and your acting and your being is dictated to you by pain that you feel or a fear of pain, or by pleasure that you feel or pleasure that you're chasing, if that's what your life looks like, this is for you.
Yeah.
Right. That's what default looks like. And default also is, so you've got short-term time frame orientation. You've got distraction, where your life is a reflection of the things that catch your attention. Right. But there's also people that are very reactionary, right? Like that. Well, this is where people think they're intentional, but they're not. Right. Like, well, I wanted to accomplish this until this happened. And well, now I have to change my course.
Right.
Right. Like, well, I got hurt, or I got injured, or this thing didn't go well, or this upset me, whatever it is, like some negative situation. You have a reactionary mindset, where an intentional mindset will allow you to say, and regardless of what's happening right now, regardless of this difficult situation, regardless of things not working out, here's how I'm going to be anyways, because these are the ways that I know will set me up for where I want to go 6 years from now, and 15 years from now, and 25 years from now.
Yeah, good. I don't want to glaze over the distracted pleasure or pain or the reactionary, because I really do think that's like, I don't want to say like a high percentage, like 99%, because that might be dramatic. I have no data whatsoever, but I really do think that's the vast majority. You'll see this a lot in particular. It may be somebody that's like, when they have a relationship, life is great, right? Oh, I'm in this relationship, I'm so in love, like everything in my life suddenly is getting so much better. Well, you're still working the same job, you're still having all the same other problems, but hey, this is the main thing. Then they break up. Oh, their whole life is now pain, right? Or with somebody else, it may be like their career. Man, when things were starting to go well at my job, then my relationship was better with this person. I started working out more. Like, they have one thing that is giving them all the pain or pleasure that's dictating their entire life, and they don't realize that this one thing is driving every area of their life, and they're just being literally just pushed around by however it goes. And when something happens outside of that, because they have no intentionality to their life, everything course corrects, like, or shifts course, like you said. They become very reactionary, and I really think that's the majority of the world. There'll be a key driver, something in there that they're chasing.
The other side of reactionary is not just the negative things it react to, but the positive.
Yes.
Right? There's an equanimity context to being reactionary, because you may be like, I really want to focus on getting debt free, or I really want to focus on working towards this investment, or I really want to focus on developing this skill set, whatever it is. Like, you've tried to set a course for something, and then you see another really great opportunity,
big time,
and you've spent 6 months preparing for this, and something else catches your eye, and you think, well, I think I could go faster that way. And without even really spending time to zoom out and look at it in the context of your life, does this fit my overall vision and mission? Does this align with where I want to be 30 years from now, 40 years from now? You say, like, well, man, I could get to where I wanted to be a year from now faster, even though it doesn't align with where I want to be 30 years from now.
Yeah.
And you let these tailwinds take you in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things you've ever said, is that the biggest thing that will throw you off course is not an obstacle, but a tailwind in another direction. And you're so right, man. So well done. Now I want to give people a few examples of
Yeah,
this.
let's talk about some good intentionality.
Yeah, let's talk about some good intentionality. And then we're going to get into the components of intentionality for how you can build yours. And we're going to give you the how-tos and the breakdown of this. But you said earlier, G, that you're very intentional about what you want your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren to look like, which, side note, I'm going to outlive you, so I'm looking forward to seeing your great-grandchildren. I tell them that all the time. Garrett once responded very seriously and with no smile instantly, not unless I kill you first. And that was a fun time for me. So anyways, I just thought people would enjoy that. Why don't you, so intentionality with children.
It's like when I give people parenting advice, I say, hey, this isn't my parenting advice from my experience as a parent. Here's my parenting advice from my experience as a son.
Right.
Right. Like my oldest is 2.5 years old. If I give you marriage advice, it's not really based upon my marriage. It's from watching some great marriages in my life.
Dude, you're past the average now.
Yeah, I am.
So well done.
But so here's some intentionality that I'm the recipient of. Like if you listen to my story, if you know me, if you've heard me talk more than a few times, you may have heard this. But something that was planted deep within me from a young age, right, is God has a plan for your life, and you can have anything you want as long as you're willing to pay the price for it. Right, I was told that over and over and over again, and it doesn't mean anything when you're 5, and it doesn't mean anything when you're 10, but it sure means a lot at a point in your life where you start to become self-aware, where you start to know who you are, and you've heard that from people who love you, care about you, and you trust, and you've heard this over and over again for the past 15 years. Becomes one of the most powerful things in your life. And so it doesn't mean, I don't want to say it doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't mean as much if you say it to someone at 20 as if you said it for the last 15 years, and also who said it, right? So that's just one example of how you being intentional, my parents were very intentional with me. So think about today, even if your children are a little bit older, even if they're in their teens, or even if they're in their 20s already, you can still begin to pour things into them. And so intentionality is this ability to leverage the power of time.
Yes.
Right? I don't need this seed to grow today.
Exactly.
I'm going to keep planting seed.
Yes.
Right? And so you can do that with your children. You can do that with people in your life that I want to help you grow. You can intentionally plant seed, but your children are such a great example of that, which is why we tell, if you're familiar with Mighty Men, what we do on Saturdays, I tell men to, they're like, man, when's a good time? Like when my son's 10 or 12, I go, if he can sit still and be quiet, bring him. Like if he's 5 years old, but he can sit still, he's not going to understand the message. It's not for him. But what's important is he sees that you value it, right? And so you're preparing your son from a very young age to say, this is what dad values, right? And so that's an example of intentionality, not waiting until the moment that you need something, but preparing for decades before the moment ever comes.
Yeah, and you talked about it. You said the word seed a few times, and it is seed sowing. How powerful would it be if everybody realized that your words are seeds as well, not just in your kids, but also to yourself? Something that I learned in NLP, which I think is fascinating, is when you criticize somebody else, for whatever reason it may be, guess who else hears that? You. And you have a subconscious. So if you're sitting there attacking someone else about something, your subconscious is logging that away as negative. So guess what? If you sit there and you see somebody who's really fit and you start saying things like, oh, I bet you they're on roids, or man, look, they're so vain. All they do is care about themselves. And then you can't figure out why it is that every time you start a workout plan, you get to a certain point and then you just sort of fall off. It's because you've sown seeds against your own mindset about this. So subconsciously, you've had negative seeds sown in there. How much more so for a kid when you say negative things over and over again? I think it's really powerful.
There's so much power. Like this is, let's just talk spiritually and psychological warfare for a second. There's so much power that we have that the enemy, Satan, doesn't have. But one thing that he has great understanding of is the power of time, right? C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters are a great example of this. But the way that the enemy works against us is he'll just get you to think a thought of vanity or get you to think a thought of greed. And then you'll shake it off and say, no, I know I'm not supposed to do that.
Right.
But you entertained it for a moment, and he's sitting back, looking at that as a success, right? He knows he's not going to flip you in a moment. He says, I'm gonna flip you over the next 7 years,
right?
And I'm gonna slowly insert these seeds right into you, and then a moment's gonna. I know I'm gonna get my opportunity to crush you, and then all these seeds that I've sown into you, that's when they're gonna ripen, and that's when they're gonna bear the enemy's fruit. you've got to look at it from the other way. One, like be intentional in not letting that type of seed be sown in your life, but also to sow seeds of faith. Right. Sow seeds of like, man, I believe for this. Like, I don't know when the seed's going to grow, but I'm going to sow into my faith. I'm going to sow into believing in God. I'm going to sow into acting this way. So just understand, look at the seed that you're planting and the seed that you allow to be planted in your life in that way, and how powerful things are over time. So also you have to be very aware of what you allow into your life, what you allow into your spirit, so much of what you allow into your thinking. It's crazy, man. If you, if you start thinking about success, you're not gonna, you're probably not gonna win the lottery next week. You're probably not going to make $1 million next week. But if you start thinking about principles of success, if you start thinking about, I'm gonna grow, I'm gonna become my best, it's crazy where you'll look 2 or 3 years from now.
Yes.
I think about where I want to be in 2 years, and it seems crazy, but I think about where I was 2 years ago, thinking about where I am today, and I think exactly the same. Like, man, that's crazy.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that. By the way, if you're looking for a good book based on what Garrett just said, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich has stood the test of time.
Oh, for sure.
It is one of my most gifted books, and it's definitely top 3 for my most recommended. So Napoleon
just like
Hill,
I said, go
Think
back
Grow
and
Rich.
listen to the first podcast.
Yes.
You've ever listened to. Go back and read. I know probably a lot of you listen to this podcast have read that book at some point in your life.
I hope so.
Think and Grow Rich.
Yeah.
Some of those early great books, probably some of the best or the first success, personal growth and development books you've ever read. If it's been like 4 or 5 years since you read that book, go read it again now and see how much you've changed.
Yeah, that's so good, G. I like that. Another example that I want to give, and this is one that I think is such a blind spot for most people, and I will go ahead and hold my hand up and say that it was mine as well, which is why I wear a Whoop. Energy. A lot of people are not very aware and therefore not very intentional about energy. And like, if you have a small kid, you're very aware of the difference between a tired child and a very well rested child.
Funny how they're not aware though.
Right. Well, yeah, you laugh about that, but how many adults are in that same thing?
Oh, it's very true.
Man, I just can't get going today. Well, what did you do? Oh, I stayed up till 2:00 watching Netflix, and I just flew in from a flight the night before, and actually I had to work all day, and I didn't really sleep very well. Well, why is that? Well, I went out and we ate like 16 cheesecakes.
But the math isn't adding up.
Right.
It's the same as if like you're someone who lives paycheck to paycheck, right? Like I had to work last week to pay for this week, but then you don't work for 2 weeks. You're like, man, this is so crazy. I have no money.
Right.
It's like, but you would never say that. You know why you have no money.
Exactly.
Right. But people don't make that connection with, and I hope you don't live paycheck to paycheck. Let's make some changes, right? Let's be a little bit more intentional with our lifestyle, right? But people don't make that connection with their energy. They're like, man, like, why don't I just feel great today?
Yeah.
What did you do yesterday?
Right. Well, a lot of people, we talked about this, and you were the first person I ever heard use the term energy budget. And it was one of those things. I remember this is actually when you were coaching me. I locked onto that so hard. And I think that was what our next session was about, because I was like, I've never heard this, but that's genius. Why? Because I was one of these people that was like, I'm just going to go 150 miles per hour all the time. I don't have a Sabbath or a rest day. I don't need that. I'm just going to go. Why? Because when I was like 18, I could do that, right? Like 18-year-olds or 21-year-olds are like, yeah, I was at the bar till 2:30 last night partying, and I had work at 5:30. Dude, I'm good. Well, you know what? That may work here and there when you're 21, but you're not 21 anymore.
If you're listening to people as your model of success and they're always talking about like grind, you just got to, do 80 hours of sales calls a week. That's not the way.
Correct.
Right. And that's what time budget versus energy budget. It makes us aware of that. It's like, man, I have a fixed, just like I have a fixed amount of time.
Yes.
I have a fixed amount of energy. I can do things to improve that and grow that. I can do things to preserve it. I just have to be aware of the fact that just like I don't have infinite time, I don't have infinite energy. And so I need to be more intentional with the things I give my time and my energy to. You understand, if you want to be more successful and more productive, I need to be intentional with where I put my time. And I need to, like, what some of the things I do is I give my early time, which is my best time and my best energy, to some of the most important things in my day. But I'm also aware of energy budget in the context of things like my relationship with my wife, that I don't use 100% of my energy and 70% of my time. Right. And get to, because my time with my wife is in the evenings, and what I don't want to be, and sometimes this happens, and I try to warn my wife, and sometimes I just screw up on this. It happened like 3 weeks ago, and like I passed out at like 7:30. Right. But I do my best to not be that way, because I don't want to just give my wife time, intentional time. Yeah. I want to give her intentional energy. That's where I first became aware of that. And then I learned how to apply that to all the other areas of my life.
Yeah, I think that's so good. In the same way that you would know what could make you more money, you need to know what gives you more energy. Like that's why I said I have the Whoop on, because that was like the first thing that really helped me give a digital metric to it. I actually got Garrett a Whoop for his birthday, and you now like it and enjoy it as well. And it's been so valuable because I know, like, if I go out and I have a carb heavy meal in the evening, like that's going to affect my sleep, right? If I'm going to bed at 10 o'clock one night, 9 the next, and if I'm all over the place, I don't have consistent bedtimes, guess what? I'm not going to feel as well rested. My energy budget's going to be a lot lower. And when you can start to go into those things, you'll start realizing why some days feel a lot harder. Well, it's because you're not very well rested. And we see this with toddlers, and we're like, oh, they need a nap. But with us, we're like, oh, I just cranked out 2 monsters, and I still don't feel great. I can't figure this out. Well, that's a lack of intentionality in your energy budget.
So be intentional in your energy. And then the last place that we can be really intentional.
You touched on it. Yeah,
I alluded to it with energy budget with my wife, but be intentional with your relationships. One, be intentional. Like, you can't have a million relationships.
Correct.
Like, and there's been studies done on this, and I don't know what the specific number is, but you really only can have a set amount of close relationships. Even Jesus was wise to the fact that, hey, I'm going to invest a lot into a few people.
Yeah.
Right. So be intentional with the people that you spend time with, but also that's one part of intentionality with relationships, but also be intentional in your relationships. I'm intentional in the way that I am with Nick. It's different than the way that I'm intentional with my wife. I'm intentional with my parents. I'm intentional with my children. I'm intentional with my mentors. I'm intentional with the leaders and mighty men. I have an intention with, this is what I want out of this relationship. This is what I want to give to this relationship. This is what makes this relationship great. And these are the things that I'm going to do today to make sure this relationship continues to grow.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you have like a to-do list every time you see me, like make sure you are mean to Nick, or does it just come naturally? I just wasn't sure about that.
I mean, your beard's gotten thicker. You've put on like 20 pounds of muscle. I mean, I feel
that's why you take credit for that. That's
feel like you are getting tougher. So,
wow. Hey, thank you, Garrett. I just never realized.
As my dad says, you look way less California.
Shout out to all our friends in California. Anyways, okay, so here's a quote on intentionality from our man, Tony Robbins, that you may not necessarily associate as a quote on intentionality. But listen to this. I love this quote. Most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. And if you think about that, the way I always say to people, go back and think about yourself. What were you doing last year, right? And how much has changed? Now go back 10 years ago. Like, regardless of where you are, if you flash back a decade, so that would be you in buds, right? Like, your life was very different. At that point, you'd probably you've been pinned at this point, right? Mm-hmm. And you were probably just making your way into Team 3, right?
Yeah, 10 years ago, we were in our workup for my first deployment.
So you had no wife, you had no kids, no businesses. Like, you didn't know a lot of the people that are very important to you now weren't even around.
Mm-mm.
And like,
I didn't have a lot of friends. I was very focused on my job.
Yeah, but everybody could do that. I mean, no matter where you're at, if you're 18, you were 8. Like, your life is way different. Any stage of life, if you flash back 10 years, you'll realize how true this is. And that happens by default. Now, imagine if you could do it by design. And you said, I'm going to be light years from where I am in 10 years. That sort of thinking, and then you start going 20 and 30, like what you said, that's the sort of stuff that gets me fired up. So while I'm fired up, let's give people the components of it and, like, break it down. Let's give you the handles. So the very first thing, and we talked about this in every example we gave.
Yeah, if you're taking notes, there's 4 pieces. 4 pieces to intentionality. So the first piece
is vision. And man, so vision questions before we get into how much vision is impactful. What do I see? Like, how should things be? Those are the questions. Those are vision questions. If that seems a little bit lofty, then you can go, well, what do I want and why? Right? Mm-hmm. That's a simpler form of starting to give yourself a vision. Well, where should I have a vision? In every area of your life, especially
in any area that you want to produce fruit.
Yes. And let me say this. If you're a man and you're married, I hope you realize that you are responsible as the leader in your home and in your marriage to have a vision for every area. There's none of this like, oh, hey, my wife takes care of the kids. I'm not saying that you have to be the primary caregiver if you have a more like a traditional setup. Garrett and I both have wives that stay home and take care of our kids, spend a lot more time with them. But you'd be foolish to think that we haven't both sat down and said, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. In our house, that means core values. That means very intentional things that we do daily. I know you guys do the same thing. Your kids are a bit younger. But just a little side note for you as a man, as the leader, you better have a vision for every area of your life if you're truly leading your family. So side note there. But in any area of your life that you want to have fruit, like you said, and this is for anybody.
Hey. Have a vision for your life unless you want to, have short-term time frame orientation, which is going to make your life look very parabolic.
Yes.
Right? Like super highs and mega lows.
Yeah.
Have a vision for your life. If you don't want to be distracted all the time, if you don't want to be the person, it's like, oh, well, I meant to get coffee, and then why am I taking out the trash?
Yeah.
Why am I, outside talking to my neighbor right now?
Right.
Right. Like if you're asking yourself the question in your life, which we've probably all asked. I could tell a really funny story about being in land nav training with this, but like, if you ever asked the question in your life of like, how did I get here? It's a lack of vision.
Yeah. Big time. Yeah, really take that. You know where people will experience that the most? I think a lot of people end up in jobs that they hate that mean nothing to them
sure.
because they had no vision. Their vision was make enough money to pay bills.
Their vision was, get a 10% raise.
Right. Or make enough money to cover these bills so I don't have to, worry about this. Or wouldn't it be nice to make this amount of money? Like chasing money is a great way to end up in a place where you're going, how did I get here? Right.
Because you didn't have and you probably lack some belief, which is a part of your vision. But you said, well, I'm going to lower my vision from be fulfilled in my job and make a great income to I just want to, make some money.
Yeah. And you know what's great about when
and you know what happens for a lot of people? They get exactly what they wanted. They found a job that paid them what they were looking for, but it wasn't everything they were looking for.
Yeah, because they didn't have the filter of vision. They would take anything else that came along with it.
If you have it, when you look way down the road in your life, the decision path looks different.
Yes, big
right?
time.
When if this is just like back in the day when people would plant a field with oxen, with animals, you would set a stake in the ground at the end of the field, and you wouldn't look down. You'd look 100 yards down the field at that stake, and that's how you draw a straight line.
That's good.
If you look 10 feet in front of the oxen, when you get to the end of the field, you look back, and it's a giant zigzag, right? And that's what people do with their life, right? They're not looking far enough down the road, so when they look backwards, it's just this squiggly line going here, going there. But if you'll look way down the road, you can even try this if you draw a line on a piece of paper. Right? Like if you draw a line across a 8.5 by 11 piece of copy paper and put your eyes right in front of the pen as you draw, and then when you finish, look back at the line.
That's good.
The other thing you can do is put your pen on a piece of paper, put your finger at the other end of the piece of paper, hold it tight, and don't look at your pen, look at your finger and just draw a straight line to your finger, and you'll draw a way straighter line. Your point of focus, your vision is what's going to determine the course of your life. So stop looking right in front of you, and you've got to say, this is what I want my relationships, this is my business, my bank account. This is what I want it to look like 20 years from now. This is what I want my thought life to be like. This is what I want my physical discipline to look like 20 years from now. So what am I going to do today?
Love that. And that's why we say today matters all the time. Like the saying of this podcast, today matters, is based on having a vision.
We may have some stickers, by the way.
We do have
for
some
Today
stickers.
Matters. Are they in the store yet?
No, they're not. But man,
maybe we can get them in the store
Boom.
by the time you guys listen to this podcast, because we have some awesome stickers that say
cool.
Today Matters.
And if you're on Mindset Mastery, guess what? You're going to get a sticker with your free shirt that you got for signing up when we started. So boom, you'll have one. And I've got one slapped on my laptop. It looks glorious and reminds me of what I already know. Today matters. Now, one thing I do want to add in before we move on to point 2, and it's shout out to Pastor Keith. He asked the question. The great thing is when you have a vision for every area of your life, then the next question that follows on that really helps with the intentionality and the daily decisions is, who do I have to be to get what I say that I want?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you start having that, that's why we said have it for every area of your life. If you say you want to have a great marriage, right? You have a vision for your marriage that you always want to be loved, like have love, connection, excitement, and that spark and that closeness. Well, now you can go, okay, well, who do I have to be? And you start getting specific. Next time my wife isn't really feeling great, or she doesn't do something that I was hoping she would do, whatever that may be, rather than reacting to it being negative, I have a viewpoint for how I want things to be 20 years from now. So I already know how I'm going to show up in that moment. Ooh, that's different. That's how you really start living intentionally. You can start looking ahead at scenarios and anticipating them, which is really what leaders do. They anticipate. So little bonus nugget there. Now, the second part of this, and it's pretty obvious, we've already kind of gotten down the road on this one, is planning, right? You have to, once you have your vision, and we said you know who you want to be, you can work back. Things to take note of in planning. You're going to be looking at, once again, time frame, right? This is a long time frame. So set your mind. I think about the person who's going to work out, and they're like, oh, I did it for a month and it didn't work. Well, how long did it take you to get out of shape? You know what I mean? It's going to take a long time to get into shape as well. And we don't think like that. I'll keep on the workout because I think it's a good example. When you're planning, what's repeatable and what are the incremental gains? And what I mean by that is, we talked about this before, G. If you worked out for 5 hours a day for 6 months and then and stopped, okay, you're probably going to be in great shape by the end of 6 months.
You'd get some good results.
Yeah. But if you just said 15 minutes a day for 7 years, That's you're gonna be,
because it's not what happens over time is the quality of your effort changes.
yes,
If you've never worked out a day in your life, your 15-minute workout your first 15-minute workout is gonna be pretty trash.
right,
Right. Not only you're out of shape, but your skill set and your knowledge of exercise is really bad.
yeah, good point.
In year 6, your 15-minute workout is going to be a very high. You're in good shape. You have great mobility, and you're going to accomplish a lot. And have your 15 minutes is worth so much more than what it used to be.
Yeah.
Right. So it's intentionality is understanding the quality of an investment over time. And if I keep sowing the seed, if I keep doing this thing, if I can plot a straight line with my life, which is what people do not have the tendency to do. It's jump over here, jump over here, jump over here. And you have this cost of friction in your life, just like the lie and illusion of multitasking all the time. Well, I'm going to do this task, and then 10 minutes later, I'm going to do this task, and then 10 minutes later, I'm going to do this task. And it costs you 3 or 4 minutes of focus each time you try to move from one task to the other. With planning in your life, you have to align that in the same way that you're setting a vision, not for next year, but you're setting a vision for 20 years from now. Create a plan that's not about what do I need to do in the next 5 minutes to get to my vision. What does it look like 20 years from now? So how do I plan in that way? It'll change the way that you plan when you're looking further down the road.
Yeah.
But then you do have to, it's the quality of your plans. And you know what? If you wrote a workout plan for the next 10 years, which one would give you a lot of, you'd really start to think about who you could be. It would change your belief, right? Just by doing that exercise. But after year 1, you'd rewrite it.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. But it would be so much more valuable if you still had the plan.
Yeah.
Right. Because you'd realize how much you change. And then it would be your plans in year 2 would look better than what you wrote in year 1, but you'd see your growth. But it would also makes you think differently. Because if you just plan for the next 6 months, your plan won't be as good as if you plan for the next 6 years. I'm not saying your plans won't improve, but it changes what happens when you look further down the road.
Yeah. We see this so often in investing as well. I think it's, 70 or 80% of Americans don't have retirement investments for themselves. And if that's you, we're not knocking you, but we're just using it as a great example. There's so much knowledge out there now that if you just keep putting money away, you could just buy the, I'm blanking on it, the S&P 500, ETF, right? Very simple. You don't even have to know anything about stocks.
I can't remember who says it because it's just off the top of my head, but there's a great quote about investing, and it says the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest.
Right. It's Warren Buffett. Yeah, Warren Buffett says it. Yeah, that's he said it would be the 8th wonder of the world would be compound interest. Yeah. So, and that's a simple example, but we see a lot of people fall down on it because it's just little and often. So the step 3, and it's very much on the lines of what we just alluded to, is disciplined execution, right? I remember when before we were even friends, G, we were just, I knew you, I was in men's ministry, and you were just the dude that led us. I was sat next to you at a mastermind, and you leaned over to me because somebody was talking about an idea, and you said, ideas are worthless, execution is everything. And obviously you work in venture to capital.
I was talking about myself because I have great ideas all the time.
Right.
And Nick gets to hear them.
Yeah, but they actually are pretty great.
I have good ideas, but they're not worth anything until you do something with it.
Yeah.
And so being someone who I value myself for the quality of my ideas, I realize man, my ideas, that's $1 billion idea. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's worthless
until
you learn how to do something with it.
Right. And so disciplined execution, like we said, this is being able to, going back to our early definition from John Locke, this is being able to not be called off by the ordinary solicitation of other ideas. This is focus. A tailwind comes along, something that actually, you know what? I thought that would be cool. I once had an idea that would be cool. Now here's the opportunity. No. What was your intentionality? If your intentionality is with your kids are tired, they're yelling at you, truly screaming at the top of their lungs, they're throwing a fit, and you want to react to it, and you want to throw off course. No. What did I say? How did I say I was going to show up? What do I want 20 years from now, my relationships to look like? That's why I'm not going to lose my temper here, because I want my kids to be able to look back and know that dad was always calm and that I was able to love them the way they needed to be loved in the moment.
Right. So because you have a great plan for that relationship, it changes what you're going to do in the moment than if you were just reacting in that moment.
Yeah.
Reactionary parenting is bad parenting, right? Intentional parenting. And there's all kinds of, Lindsay and I were talking about this yesterday, of how if you go back 30 years ago, a lot of people parented really the same. A lot of millennials were parented the same. But today, millennials as parents, there's all these different parenting styles and parenting philosophies, right? But if you would just stick with your plan in parenting and be intentional. So the point that I'm making is, like, today we have so many different options for parenting. Whatever your style of parenting is, it just needs to be intentional and stick with that plan.
Yeah.
Don't go from one style of parenting in
Right.
1 minute to another style of parenting the next minute.
Yeah. The disciplined execution really is probably where most people fall down. Would you agree with that, G?
Oh, absolutely. Because you can have a great vision, and that's important. That's setting the course. And you can have a clear plan, project management. Like, I need to know, what does the next 6 months look like? What does the next 6 years look like? But someone has to execute on this plan.
Yeah.
And it's a disciplined execution, right? There's two words there, the disciplined part, right? Like, am I going to do what I know to do? Right. Okay. So I wrote a plan of, I'm going to run for the next year. I'm going to run 4 times a day, 4 times a week, not 4 times a day.
Say, wow.
Four times a week for 20 minutes each week. And then on these days, like, you have to actually do it.
Yeah.
Right. And that's discipline, doing what you know to do. That's the hard part. It's what it comes down to. But then there's execution, right? And execution is, so planning, you could say, is strategy, knowing what to do. And then discipline execution is the tactics, knowing how to do it, right? What is the quality of your execution and your tactics? I can teach people SEAL tactics, but that doesn't mean they're any good at it, right? So there is the skill set side of discipline execution, which, where if you're intentional with something over time, you'll actually get better at that.
Yes.
And then your intentionality improves. Because this is what we want. Like, we're telling you how to be intentional. We want your intentionality to get better, not for you to just know what it is, but that you become very great at being intentional.
Yes. So those first 3 steps were vision, planning, disciplined execution. And then part 4 of this is assessment, right? Like, you have to, if you don't schedule a regular time to look back and ask yourself a couple questions, some simple ones would be like, what went well? What would I have changed? What could have gone better, right? Like, or what didn't go well, right?
A lot of people will have a great vision, and then they'll take off on that, and something happens, right? It doesn't, their plan does not go according to plan.
Yeah, it's most people.
And they don't know what to do. And so they never go through this season of assessment, right? You have intentional assessment where you look back, okay, I set a straight, I put that stake at the end of the field, but I didn't make a straight line. Let's pause for a second and say, what did we do wrong?
Yeah.
Not just keep doing that. But sometimes people will have that vision and they're disciplined. They're just plowing away, but they're not taking the time to assess and reshape the plan. Do I need to change some things? Does my equipment have an issue? Is my bull or ox that's pulling my plow sick? And is my eye crooked? Like, am I doing something wrong? You have to take the time to look at your plan and make sure that you are drawing that straight line. This is what I wanted my line to look like. This is what I wanted my life to look like. Does it look like that? If it doesn't, what do I need to change?
Yeah. And I learned this from you, G, because I think we sat down with our Mighty Men leaders years ago, and I think that the 3 questions, I screwed them up. I think it was what went well, or what's working, what's not working, what could be better, right? Those are the questions that you asked us in Mighty Men.
It's my MO for Mighty Men is that we're going to be better every year than we were the last year.
Yeah, well, I've taken that and adopted it and applied it into my own businesses. I own a production company with a business partner of mine, and after every shoot, and keep in mind, we do multiple projects all the time throughout the year. After every shoot, we ask those questions. What do you think happens? We start highlighting blind spots. And it makes us better. We're multiplying our days and multiplying our experience.
Yeah, we were really great with our equipment.
Yeah,
but, we didn't show up with a plan to how to set up, and so people didn't know what gear to set up. And you're like, man, we're not going to let that happen again.
Yeah, exactly. Or a real life scenario was like we had a problem with the cable, and it's like one of us had to sit there and mess with it, and it was like we should have been prepared for that with A, having backups, but B, having somebody that knows
probably had
their
the wrong person messing with the cable.
That's exactly right. And simple things like
don't
that.
have the shoot producer messing
That's
with the
exactly
cable.
like it's simple things like that, and we're laughing about it. But like, imagine if you do that in every area of your life, or if you do it in your life as a whole. I've actually started. There are a little bit more. I have 8 questions. Once on the first of every month, I have what I call a vision session. It's in my calendar, and it's early in the morning because I know I won't be distracted.
Vision alignment.
Yeah, that's what it is. I literally look. I have my goals. I have my overall vision and mission for my life, and I will ask myself 8 questions. And I look. My time frame orientation on this is 30 days. It's 1 month at a time. I look back on the past month. I look ahead on the next month, and I have a couple questions in there that are linked to one of my core values, which is dream. And so I ask myself questions to make sure I'm stirring up these things, and I'm very, very intentional. So what do you think's happened? We're 7, almost 8 months into the year. It's the best year of my life.
Yep.
As far as what I've been able to accomplish and getting to my goals and just a lot of metrics that you could look at, I'm having the best year of my life. Like we said, a lot of people coming into this year were going, what if we have a recession?
Man. You go back to November 2022, people were like, man, 2023, COVID, nuclear bombs.
Yeah.
The economy is
They're
going
to raise the rates. They did that again today. Guess what? Still winning, right?
Still winning.
Still winning, like our man DJ Khaled, you know?
You know why? Because at the end of last year, we set a course.
Indeed.
We said, this is what my line is going to look like. This is what my life is going to look like. And every day, today matters. I'm going to do things that march to that. I'm going to hold myself accountable to it. I'm going to be very disciplined. And I'm going to assess along the way. I'm going to do these every 30-day vision alignments. And man, it's going to be crazy when I look up a year from now, when I look up 5 years from now, and I'm so much further than I thought I could ever be.
Yeah.
Right? Intentionality is one of the most powerful forces in your life. We know that because it's one of the things that God is, that he gave us the ability to have. Not on his level, but we model him in those ways. Do not walk through life and think that you can live a quality life, that you can live up to your greatest potential without being intentional. You have to literally see into the future what your life is going to look like.
Yeah, there's a great scripture in Proverbs, G, that talks about wisdom will multiply your days. And if you think about that, and then it also says, and add years to your life. So there's separate things that it's talking about. So how can you multiply your days? Well, what did I just talk about? When you look back and you start adding a structure to assess your intentionality, what happens is you get way more out of every single day because you're actually stopping and learning the lessons of the day or the lessons of the month or whatever the time frame is that you're looking back on, and your vision alignment. Where am I going? How am I doing? Now I've multiplied my days. And like I said, I'm looking back right now, almost 8 months into the year, and I'm going, man, like honestly, if I stopped right now, and this is not a flex, but if I stopped right now, I would already be like, man, this is a phenomenal year for the whole year. Yeah. I'm not going to do that, but I'm just saying, like, it's
you're barely halfway through.
I know, but it's incredible, and this is what I'm saying. Wisdom. This is wisdom that we're giving you about intentionality. If you want to multiply your days, if you're a squeeze the lemon person, and G and I say that to each other a lot, squeezing every drop out of life, then you have to be intentional. I promise you. Otherwise, you'll look back and you'll be the Tony Robbins person that like underestimated what they could do in 10 and overestimated in a year, and they had a bunch of years just lurching to and fro, and you don't want to be that person. So, G, you got anything else, or are we going to wrap up with a challenge?
Let's wrap up with the challenge. And I would encourage every single one of you to take this 4-step: vision, planning, discipline, execution, and assessment. Write it down, and as soon as you can, have an intentionality session with yourself.
Yes.
Look at the areas of your life and say, man, am I really being intentional in my career? Am I being intentional in my business? Am I being intentional in my family? And so that for the first question in each of those areas, and this is not going to be a short exercise, is what is my vision?
Yeah.
If you don't have a clear vision for any area of your life, you do not have intentionality for that area of your life. And let me remind you, just like I said, your life is not going to live up to its greatest potential if you're not intentional with that. So take this 4-step: vision, planning, discipline, execution, and assessment. Sit down and have an intentionality session with yourself and look at the areas of your life. How intentional are you?